probably get it but pretend like they don't because it helps make them money. It's controversial. It's sensational. They want to keep it that way because it makes money.
This is Don. You're on WGN. Hi, Don.
How you doing, John?
Hey.
The biggest problem I see with this is, number one, it would be the equivalent of opening up a Nazi center next to a concentration camp.
Okay, hold on a second. I want him to respond to that. That's an interesting analogy. What about something like that, Ahmed?
It's an interesting analogy. It's also the wrong analogy. The analogy that he would be more correct to make is building a Nazi center in front of a concentration camp is analogous to building a terrorist center in front of Ground Zero, not an Islamic center.
And Muslims aren't terrorists. But you know the flip is true, though. The terrorists are Muslims. You understand how we say if A equals B, then B ought to equal A. These people say if you are part of that group, then everybody in that group is like that. You understand how they make that assumption, Ahmed. You know, it'd be nice if just once Methodists flew planes into buildings, and then this whole argument would get diluted.
But it's factually incorrect to believe that all terrorists are Muslims. I mean, basically, there are Tamil Tigers who are Hindus. There are IRA, terrorists who are Catholic. There are secular, communist, all sorts of terrorists, Christian in Latin America. It's nationalist, etc. And obviously, there are Muslim as well. Now, granted, Muslims, get a lion's share, unfortunately, of this type of thing. But again, the statement is not about terrorists. The statement is about Muslims. Muslims are 99.99999% non-terrorists, and that's a fact. And to continue to, paint them with the brush of terrorism is statistically preposterous.
Still, what do you think the odds are the next time somebody tries to blow something up that they'll be of the Muslim faith?
There is an organization called Al-Qaeda that has beef with the United States. So the likelihood of the next act being of somebody affiliated with that is pretty high, but that's to be contextualized. It doesn't say anything about me, my father, my uncle, my cousin, my family. It says something about a particular historical event that is yet unfolded.
I didn't say that you were a terrorist. I said that, and now I'll go back to the reason we got you on the radio today, that a center of Muslim faith at Ground Zero would be something that the terrorists would appreciate, wouldn't they?
Absolutely not. The terrorists do not function within our mainstream mosques. They're underground. They're underground to us as they are to non-Muslims. It's not like they're sitting there in the middle of a hall in a mainstream mosque and planning and plotting the next terrorist act.
I think people actually think, my God, they'll be right there. The terrorists will be right there at Ground Zero thumbing their nose at us, Ahmed.
Absolutely not. They would be turned in, by Muslims in an instant. They obviously are people who are trained to be secretive, to be deceiving, and they are afraid of the limelight, a mosque being the center of the limelight. They don't operate within those mainstream institutions.
Ahmed Rehab is the Executive Director of the Council on American Islamic Relations. So should there be a cultural center for Muslims in the community next to Ground Zero? The last two calls are Lee and Joe. Lee, you're on Lee, it's not going to be you. It's going to be Gene. You're on WGN. Hi, Gene.
Good afternoon. How are you today?
Good. Your question is?
Good. Well, first of all, I just want to thank you for giving your caller the time to express his views to the citizens of the United States, because that is what we are, certainly all about. We're all about the First Amendment and free speech, and everybody here has a voice. I differ a little bit on his position on his description of various terrorist groups throughout the world, and we know there are many, many terrorist groups from the IRA to
What's your question, Gene? What do you need to know?
Well, first of all, I'd like to know where his priorities lie, and because basically what he did is he set himself up as spokesman for 99.999% of the Muslims in the world, and that is his statement. And I don't think he...
Now, here's what I think your point is, because you just asked Beth and she typed it on the screen. Are you an American first or are you a Muslim first, Ahmed?
That's like saying, do I have a shirt on or a pair of pants? I mean, they're not in competition with one another. I need them both. And, being French, being American, being Egyptian, being Indian is on the same plane. One can compete with the other. Being Christian, being Jewish, being Catholic, same thing. But you can't shift from a nationality to a religion, compare and contrast and compete. It doesn't work that way.
Some of our callers, including Joe on line one, Joe, I'll ask what you said to Beth, and that is, McVeigh is the example that a lot of people point to. Here's a domestic terrorist who is not a Muslim, that happens as well. Do you have a comment on that, Ahmed?
I think it's absolutely true that is also possible. It's all about possibilities. The possibility is high right now that it will be a member of Al-Qaeda or an affiliated organization due to historical events unfolding before us. But it is not an inherent statement on Islam or Muslims. And, once upon a time, not too long ago, the same guys who today form Al-Qaeda were fighting the Soviet Union and were deemed by the United States government and people as heroes. Today, the history shifted. They're fighting us. They're deemed terrorists. So it is also contextualized. To me, anybody who kills innocents is a terrorist, needs to be condemned regardless of faith.
Is there any truth to this rumor, or at least this is a posting that's circulating on the Internet, that terrorists build mosques as signs of victory at the sites where they did battle, like 9/11? This is, again, their trophy.
That's absurd fear-mongering. Terrorists operate in the shadows. They are criminals. That's what criminals do. Mainstream communities build mosques. They're people who, like you and your neighbor and everybody else just wants to live and let live.
What is your website, Ahmed?
It's cairchicago.org, CAIR Chicago.org.
That's because it stands for the Council on American Islamic Relations, the Executive Director, Ahmed Rehab. We'll talk again. Thanks for your time today.
Thanks so much, John.